Hello, everybody. So we have here Bart Shaw, and I'm Darguin Fortuna. We're gonna be having a little traveling into La La Land back in the day moment. So we're both members of the SFX Small Firm Exchange. We're members for different states. Bart is in Texas, and I am in Massachusetts. So as you guys know, the topic of this year in SFX is about basically the journey of running a practice. It's actually practice, the topic, and what a better way of talking about that than actually going back into that story and how we got to where we are. So who do we have here? So we have Bart Shaw, a fellow AIA. He's an architect practicing in Fort Worth, Texas, where he started an I'm sorry, guys, it's really fun words here, eponymous design firm in 2011. Later co-founding Ibanez Shaw Architecture in 2017. Bart holds a Master's of Architecture degree and a Bachelor's of Science degree in Civil Engineering from Texas Tech University. Ooh, those Texas guys. While he was born, raised, educated, and practices in Texas, his body of work has received national and international attention for an approach to design that goes beyond program to illuminate the highest aspirations of his projects with striking conceptual clarity. His extraordinary body of work led to his elevation to the prestigious AIA College of Fellows in 2019. Congratulations. His projects have been recognized by Americans for the Arts, the American Institute of Architects, the Chicago Athenaeum, and the International Interior Design Association, the Texas Society of Architects, chapters of the AIA and IIDA, and has been included in numerous exhibitions. Wow. Bart recently presented at the Facades Plus conference in Dallas, AIA architectural conferences in Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. And Bart is also a contributing editor to Texas Architect Magazine and adjunct professor at the University of Texas at Arlington. Wow, that's a mouthful, Bart. That's a lot. And now we got to go back how you got here, right? So yeah, did I miss anything? Did I get it all in there?
No, it's good enough.
Like probably it's like 20 pages of bio information that you probably have. But yeah, so take it away. Tell us a little bit about that, like how you got started, how was that beginning and that journey, and yeah.
How far back do you want to start? Just starting my firm?
Yeah, I would say so. Hey, it's practice. We
Well,
got to talk about that part. Running the practice.
let's see. I I finally got my architect's license in 2007 and was working at a mid-sized architecture firm here in Fort Worth. And I've always wanted to be an architect since I was a little kid, and and especially over time going to school, to me, it meant a lot, still means a lot to call yourself an architect. And when I finally got my license, I really felt like, okay, what am I going to do? The work I was doing at the firm I was at was fine. I was contributing, but I really wanted to look beyond that and see, really what does it mean now that I'm an architect? And so I started doing design competitions, and I did a hurricane relief housing competition. I think that year, a year later, 2008 maybe. And I didn't win the competition. I didn't place, but I decided to enter the design in the local design awards and the state design awards. And I entered it locally, and the dean of the University of Texas Arlington, Larry Speck, was one of the jurors. And he pulled me aside and asked me about the project. I said, well, Larry, it must not have been that good. It didn't place. And he goes, no, it's good. And so I entered it at the state level, Texas Society of Architects, and that won a state award. And the firm that I was at had never won a Texas Society of Architects design award. And so there was an awkward moment where they came over to my desk and asked me if they could hang my design award on their wall. And I told them no. And it was hanging inside of one of my closets at home. But So anyway, so I started
So
to
wait
get
a
this
minute,
idea.
wait a minute. That was pretty bold. I have to stop you there. So
Yeah.
you didn't do the competition with your firm? Like there weren't anybody else within the firm helping you?
No, it was all nonprofit competitions. I did talk to people in the firm about working on the competition, and we had a one meeting with I think 3 or 4 people. But then when it really came down to doing the work, everybody dissipated, and so I ended up doing it by myself. Um, and Anyway, one of the well, I'll tell you. So that after that, I ended up I went to the design awards. They used to have a gala, where you sit down, dinner, and everything, and at the state level. So I did that and took my wife with me, and she said, sort of shocked look on her face. She goes, "Wow, you know, you may be pretty good at this. You should try and do another one of these." Which is the last time she ever said anything like that.
Well, that
So
was your wife that said that?
as my wife has said that, yeah, and then she didn't really know what that meant. But so I did. I entered another one a couple of years later. It was a Holocaust memorial competition in Atlantic City. It was an international competition. It was juried by Richard Meyer, Daniel Liebskin, and Wendy Evans Joseph. And so I put a lot of time into that and thought, research. Entered that competition. There were 715 entries, and I got in the top 10 as a finalist.
Wow.
So I got a stipend to do a model and prepare a presentation, and took that to Atlantic City. And that didn't go any further either. But it was interesting, like when they had the announcement page, on the internet, you go in there and it says like, Munich, Zurich, New York, Bedford, Texas. It's an oddball thing. That's where we were living at the time. Um, yeah, so I had encouragement that I felt like I could do more than what I was doing inside of my firm, the work I was doing, and I got had a memorable employee evaluation where they told me that um, one of the things was that I was stubborn, and the other one was that I was self-promoting. The stubbornness I just took as really that's sort of a virtue in Texas to be stubborn. So it's like, yeah, that's great. The self-promoting thing I took a little bit as an insult, but later on, I thought, well, you know, if I really think I can do more than I'm doing here, I'm not going to steal their clients. I'm not going to. People are not going to give me projects if I'm here to do on my own. So I really should just jump and see if I can and make anything of having a
So wait a
firm.
minute. So your firm basically saw you a little bit as a threat, and you were within the
I don't
firm.
think they saw me as a threat. I don't think, I think people view themselves through their own lens.
Mm-hmm.
So I think through, who these people were, and they're great people. I still get along with them, but I don't think they thought I was going anywhere.
Okay.
And I think honestly, had I been given work to do and a little bit the reins had been loosened to where I felt like I was able to do really impactful work there, I'd still be there. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't,
Mm-hmm.
I don't really, I never thought I have to have my own firm.
So you didn't
Um,
think that that was like the only option for you to really
well, at that
to
time,
have
I felt like it was,
a fulfilling career, you know?
no, I think I could have come to work for you. And if we were doing great work, I would have been, I think I would have been perfectly happy,
Mm-hmm.
honestly. The problem was I didn't feel like I could do great work, and that I felt like at that point that I was beginning to have confidence I was capable of doing something more, but would never have the opportunity to do that there. Um, and that was the main motivating factor. That is not a good business plan, right? That is not a business plan at all.
Certainly not. I mean, you didn't know anything about business at all, so that was one
Nothing.
thing, you know. So
No.
what it appears, you were a talented designer in the capital design part of the architecture field, you know, which there are many sides of the architectural world, which we have
Right.
learned over time. So then you just took off and
Yeah, I had done work there. So the place I had in the firm, I created a niche for myself where I was designing my own projects. I was writing contracts. Um, I was designing them. I was documenting them fully and doing the CA on my own projects.
Mhm.
So I had a good basis just in general how to produce the architecture. But dealing with the clients, billing, all of the other things surrounding architecture, that you don't see when you're in a big firm. I didn't know, and I never worked at a
So
small
you
firm.
knew that from here's the project to here's how we deliver the project and get it built. But like these other things that happen, in the periphery of like how do you
Sure.
even got that project,
Yeah.
and how's the
How do you
money coming in and coming out, right? Like
yes. How do you negotiate cash flow?
the,
Where to get projects, how to market, some of these things I still don't know. But you don't comprehend that there's really this much knowledge you need to know to run a firm, and you have this little slice that you know. And you don't I didn't realize that until I got out and really
So how was
started.
your first commission? Where did you get your first project? How was that?
It was rough. Again, I intentionally didn't contact clients when I left. Some of them found me. Um, so I just had a very little work. I also it was a bad time. It was the end of the recession. This was 2011, early 2011. And at least here in Texas, things were still in major recovery. There was not a lot of work going on for anybody. So I just decided again, and I'd done all these competition. I continue to do competition work for the next several years. And I was just trying, my idea was, what can I do to stay afloat and buy time for the economy to recover and for me to hopefully get more recognition and be able to find work? So I did all sorts of things. I had little projects from former clients. I had little house renovation projects that I did. A lot of what I did early on to make ends meet was I did permitting services for contractors. And I thought that was a good idea. It was something I knew I could do. And it didn't involve me designing things that I did not think were contributing to my ultimate goals for me as a designer and as a business. I didn't want my name on a bunch of stuff I wasn't proud of. So that was a good, it didn't involve producing architecture really involved.
I mean, but they had some architecture already done, right?
Oh yeah, it had other
Like, so
architects
they
on
would
it.
just, yeah. How do you connect with that group of contractors? Most contractors hate the paperwork. That's kind of one of the reasons why they,
Well, yeah. There's a lot
yeah.
of contractors. I mean, and another thing you realize, only working at large firms, you're working with really good contractors, and the reality is the landscape out there. Those really, again, landscape spectrums like this, the really good contractors are up here, and the wild west exists over here. So within sort of the spectrum of contractors, very few of them really know how to navigate the process and what's involved. And so yeah, I did all sorts of things. I just helped people who were in just total mired down in permitting because they had an architect that just did a limited set of plans. And it's bottled up in a city's engineering department, or they had a three-party contract that they had to get done with a sub, and no one understood what the mechanics of that was or how to get it through the city because they don't speak the same language. Um, and so I did some of that and getting involved with those contractors. I eventually started doing some things. Some of them were design build guys. And I did design a couple projects that were fairly nice and got to work with their subcontractors to build them. And I learned a lot doing that. Also learned sort of the set of rules, the sort of teaching you get working for large firms is to limit your interaction with contractors, limit your interaction with subcontractors, and it's all about the sort of liability control, which they help, within their business. They feel like that puts them in a safer place. I found doing smaller projects, I felt the opposite, where these architects who were doing these contractors were putting themselves in a more vulnerable place by not being involved and not really helping solve, the real architectural problems beyond a limited set of drawings. And so I learned a lot about doing that, just sort of getting your hands dirty and helping really get some projects produced.
Nice, nice. And so it was just you for a little
Just
while
me,
doing your
just
thing.
me. I one of the things that helped me also in this period, especially if not having ever worked for a small firm, was the community of architects that was around me, and they owe a lot of credit for whatever I've ever done that's been good. Because early on, I was told, coming out of school, that architects eat their young, and I've just not found that to be true. Um, the small firm community around Fort Worth, the people that I met through AIA, there are people I called and asked all sorts of questions, about contracts, about dealing with clients, about graphics, about all kinds of things. But I had a network of architects that were willing to give me freely information, even though technically I was competing with them. And that was extremely helpful during that time period.
All right, so here's Bart. Okay, gets out of the office after that amazing review, right, that you got, and then decide to start doing things and start doing all sorts of things. But I guess that was a good idea, helping contractors. So you started to see what you were lacking from the bigger firms, because it's true, there is a big disconnect. And we know that before, the architect was the master builder, the everything, right? Going back to ancient Egypt, right? But back in the day. So you could do all of that stuff. So now you started getting skills that you didn't have before that probably contributed to your success. But how do you start getting your first commissions? How do you go about establishing the business, navigating the regulations of being an architect? Because there is a thing that you think you are when you get out of school and then get licensed, but the actual practice, right? Like, it's something that eventually starts morphing, and you're like, oh, wait a minute. At least in my own personal experience, I started seeing all the things in ways that I didn't know. Even authority and power that I didn't know I had too in certain things. I'm like, wow, I didn't know I had that authority. So in that sense, like, how do you start, and like when do you hire your first person? That's another question too. Like, how do you go about that stuff? And I want to hit those points because I know a lot of people that are small firms are solopreneurs, right? And they don't know whether they should hire somebody or not and when. So I want to know a little bit about those early, like that first project. How do you go about it? Those first really remarkable projects that you started getting and all that.
That's a tough one. You think I think before, you make the leap and start your own firm, you think that's sort of the leap, but it turns out there's a whole bunch of these leaps. That's just the first one. And hiring an employee and taking on that responsibility and just the confidence that you'll have enough work to keep them busy is really a second leap. But I totally agree with you. There's sort of this process of forming this idea of what it really means to be an architect around you. I remember going to a conference on architecture and walking around after I started my own firm. It said whatever, Bart Shaw architect on my badge. And I remember feeling like just such a poser. It's like I just left my job and just wrote that on my badge. Beyond that, what does that really mean? And I'm, thinking I got like 2 months before this whole thing crashes. Gonna go be begging somebody for a job. But I just kept pushing. I did anything I could get my hands on that I thought I could do something with. Some things that I were just, I took things that were just sort of functional to whatever I could get my hands on to that, or fee I could get someone to pay. And it just slowly built. I think I had a good relationship with contractors. I always have at my the bigger firms I was at. And so I had some good contractors recommend me for some small projects that became nice projects. One of the first projects I had, I started my firm in 2011. This is probably 2014 or 15. So this is a few years later. I had done a lot of I don't know, just speculative design work for some developers, all for a fee. I didn't do anything without getting paid. I never had. And I'd done a lot of luxury retail.
So how do you go about doing work that you got paid? How do you go about that? Because a lot of people start rendering services.
I just refuse not to do it. you know, and I mean, you know, and again, this is part of my impetus for starting my firm was, yeah, again, I really thought I could do something. I wanted to see if I could do it, but I was going to do it sort of on my terms, and I had terms. And if it didn't work, it didn't work. You know, I always felt like I still do. I can go get a job somewhere. I'm going to do it on my terms. I'm not going to do it. One of my terms is I'm not working for free. There's a value in what architects bring to the table, and they should be paid for it. So I didn't do that. I never lowered my fees lower than my competition. I kept my fees at a reasonable level and made a case for myself. If I didn't get it, I just walked away. Um, so I've held to that pretty tight over the years. You know, and it's probably goes back to being stubborn.
And it
I don't
also,
know.
you know,
It's,
there are people that are like, you know, I guess when you're getting started, I guess you were very bold. You're right. You were stubborn because getting started, I don't know your social, economical, financial background, right? Like I don't know how life was quitting that office and being on your own and
yeah,
having a
I didn't
wife. I
have
don't know
any
if you
money.
have, yeah,
I
don't know if you
I
had
was
any kids.
married.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had one. We had at that point. We had our daughter was 3, and I think at the time that I quit and started my firm, my son was maybe 1. So we had, you
That
know, a
wasn't
baby
really
in
a
the
good
house.
time to do it, by the way.
Well,
So
here's the thing is though, we
looking
always,
at it, right? Like wife, one a little bigger, and then another one barely getting to walk, and then you decide to just take this leap without any clue of how to run a business. And
you're
come
making
on,
me
Bart,
sound
you probably
crazy,
were
Darwin.
making no, but I'm telling you, you
No,
were probably
it was
making good money already at your firm.
well, I
It's a
was,
good size firm, so yeah.
it was several years before, I was getting close to making the same amount of money I was making. No, it was maybe not the smartest thing in the world to do. But my wife and I wanted to have more kids. We have 5 kids now. We always knew we wanted to have a big family. And you know, your life changes with the first one. You kind of get an idea of kind of what's ahead of you. And I knew if I didn't do it then, I was never going to do it. That it was not going to get any easier. And I felt like that was, even though the economy wasn't great, I felt like just in the arc of my life, if I didn't do it then, I probably would never do it.
Now, have you ever thought of doing something else other than architecture? Like, I mean, you quit
Sure,
that
all the time.
job. I know that, right? Yeah, we all do. But what I mean is seriously consider something else, like throughout the whole journey. You know what I mean? Like I know getting out of the office where you were at, which doesn't sound like a bad experience. It was just something that you could do more, and you wanted to do more, and and
Sure.
you knew you could do it. But
The
do you
only
have you
time I
ever?
did, I'll
Yeah.
tell you, the only time I did, well, there were probably multiple times, but the one that comes to mind, and maybe it helps explain some of this other stuff is, so when I went to college, I always wanted to be an architect, but I ended up getting a degree in engineering. And the
Yeah, I
reason
was gonna
was
ask that. I was gonna ask that.
I had to
Yeah.
pay for my school. The
Hmm.
scholarships in architecture are awful, but hopefully they're better now than they were.
Yeah.
But their scholarships for engineering are fantastic. They get research money. People put their names on buildings and endow scholarships. So what happened was I got enough engineering scholarships to pay for both degrees in the end. Um, and so
So was
at
that a
the end,
strategy, or it just happened that way? I mean, what was
well,
that your
everything that
strategy?
I've done is probably, it wasn't, it was a strategy in the sense that I wanted to go to college and I wanted out of my house. But it wasn't something I knew enough about going in to say I'm going to try and do this. My dad was an engineer, and so he was always pushing me to go the engineering route. And so I said, "Well, I'll look into it," but he was not contributing anything. Um, However, when you're young and a kid and you just sort of don't know that you can just leave and go figure it out for yourself, or I did. So so I sort of used that for my dad. Went down that, explored the scholarship route. I had been homeschooled through high school. And so
Wow,
I
interesting.
had,
I wouldn't have never known that you were homeschooled
yeah,
through
that's
high
a whole
school.
different story. Probably not going to get into that. But my parents were very religious, to say the least, and that had some of the motivation to it. There's some other
You're giving
factors.
me hopes because my children are currently being homeschooled. And
Yeah,
I'm
that's
not
a whole
much.
nother discussion.
I'm not much
I,
of
I
a
did,
fan, but yeah, no,
I'm
no, no.
not either.
But this,
I'm not either.
and you did it. You turned out
Well,
okay.
I did it. Well, it
I mean,
was
you're just a
not my
crazy guy
decision.
that quits his job and goes to open a firm with one child,
Right.
another one coming. But yeah,
Yeah. Well, where I was going with that is so at the end of college, I had a degree in civil engineering with emphasis in structures and a master's degree in architecture and started interviewing. And I said, well, I'll talk to the engineering people and architecture people. And at that time, again in Texas, oil is huge and offshore oil rigs all require engineering and I could make $68,000 a year, I think, going and being an engineer. And, the offers I got for architecture were 32, 34. So I think my first job was 32. Um, so that I think that was the point where I really decided, look, do I love this enough that I care about it more than the money? And so I'd made that decision from the beginning. And so maybe that just over time instilled itself that, if I really wanted to make money, I'd be, engineering offshore oil rigs right now. And
so you literally ask
vacationing in warm places.
yourself, do I love this enough that I would not mind forfeiting a much more financially free life than doing this like that? I
Yeah.
mean, was that something that you even consulted with your wife? Was that something that you even consulted, or like was that done prior? Like, because I know you wanted to be an architect, you use engineering.
Yeah.
I guess now looking in hindsight, because it's 2020, right? Vision is 2020. So you're looking at it, you're like, oh, that was a very good strategy for me to do architecture, which is what I love. But you could have made more money as an engineer. I mean, even
Sure.
right now, you would have been way better off. I think.
Probably. Did the math.
Maybe not as fulfilled because that wasn't what you love. But that
Right.
like, I mean, I don't know how
You
many
just make that
people.
decision
Mhm.
at some point. And I think probably, the way I was raised, you know, probably influenced a lot of that. Um, but yeah,
So
and
you
as
were
far as my
raised,
wife,
going. I'm actually just like turning into a psychologist, I guess. But you were raised in a way that
I need all the help I can get.
I know. So no, but you were raised in a way that fulfillment and passion and doing what you love meant much more than anything else. Like other,
Not in those
it wasn't even
terms,
about fame or about money or about. It wasn't even.
well,
You mentioned that
yeah,
little bit of self promotion, but you don't look at it as you were trying to self promote. You embrace who you were, and if you happen to
sure,
be shiny, then great, you take it.
right.
But the way you were raised, I mean, am I understanding that it was that?
Kind of. I mean, the way I was raised wasn't like go off and do whatever you want to with your life. It was, my parents were very conservative um, Christians, and it was more about, you know, you know, humility, fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, and that, you know, greed or love of money, is the beginning of all evil, and just some fundamental principles about, caring about people, your relationships with people are the most important things in the world. And then to me, I began to see architecture as a way of relating to people. And that if I could do architecture that really related to people and they could sort of be a extension of somebody's soul and gave a way for other people to interact with them for a longer period of time than they get to live, then that's a very meaningful thing to be doing. And then some of these other things are not as meaningful.
You
And so
just
when you think
really
about it,
blew my mind. I mean, you just put it together so nicely right there. I mean, it's like
no,
no wonder why we got a fellow here. But yeah, and sorry that I interrupt you, but really,
that's right.
it looks like and I recently read the 12 rules for life of Mr. Peterson, Jordan Peterson. So I was like, I guess I relate to that, right? Like having a meaningful life is much more important than having anything else, right? What's the legacy that you're leaving behind? So I guess, I I wanted to dig a little bit in that, and I don't want this to be too long. I know a lot of people, small firms probably are watching this, don't want to be listening to the entire thing, and maybe they do, but not on this one, right? But I So having that clear purpose and meaning was more important, and having a meaningful life was much more important than any of those other material items. And I guess you followed that path, right? But you
Yeah,
always knew you could fall back on becoming an engineer and just doing engineering, right? You have
sure.
plans B, right? So that's why I was wondering, like, did you seriously ever consider quitting architecture altogether? Like, do you get to? I know you mentioned it laughing, like, yeah, all the time. But what I mean is, like,
Not
meaningfully.
really. Well, I sort of dream about like, what would it be like to just design shoes, something else.
Me
But
too. Me too. By the way, I subscribe. If you
because
ever open one, I want to be part of
yeah,
that because
well,
I
it's the
do.
same skill set, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
I do
it's
that.
functional. There's materials. All manufacturing. It's just like construction. Anyway, um, but not really. I mean, after some point, I'm getting old now. At some point, it just doesn't make a lot of practical sense. So um, I don't think about. I mean, if I bail out of at some point, it's still the same struggle as I always have since I started my firm. At some point, you just run out of work and have no work. I have to go do something else. But it'd be in architecture at this point. I'm not going to go back and be an engineer in training and start over. I don't think.
No, I know. I meant more towards the whole
I might.
journey.
I don't know.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
was the whole journey. But now, going back into that first hire and opening the business
Yeah.
and getting all the stuff together, how was that?
Yeah. So it I did it sort of piecemeal. So like I said, it was about 2015 before I really had a client that came to me and said, "I've seen some of your work out there. I'm really, inspired by what you're doing. I want what you have to offer." I mean, it was years, right? And so then I had a string of projects that um, I could do something with that were inspiring, and started building up, some cushion. For the first, I don't know, probably 4, maybe 5 years, I would literally think several times a day, not several times a week, maybe later on, about how much time I had left. I have enough fee to stay in business a month. I'm enough fee to stay in business for another 3 months, or and so on. So I would literally think about how much time I had left based on the work I had, and so that sort of latent anxiety just over time starts to dissipate naturally. But once I finally had, it was
So you were
not
always
weeks.
looking at that bank account, right? Like,
Oh
let me
yeah.
see where I am. Let
I
me
mean, back
see.
to your other question, I had no reserve. My family's not wealthy. They didn't give me any money. I don't have. But my wife's a school teacher, so she
Go
has an
teachers.
income.
That's a good job. Don't
Teacher.
worry. Yeah, go
Well,
teachers.
it's a reasonable, but it's not enough money for it'd be very, very difficult to live,
Mm-hmm.
with a few kids and
So
a husband
so
not
you were
working.
always looking at the income and projections, I guess, of
Yeah,
however many
right.
projects you had, and in
So when that got to a
relationship.
point where you just couldn't, that was out far enough that it's whatever, 4 months or 3 months. And then, the work's just piling up. It's the struggles you have when you have a lot of work with small firms, as you know well, is you spend all your time during the day in meetings and on the phone, and you don't actually have any time left to do the work. So really having that employee that can really do the work all the time becomes critical to really being able to get everything done. So I hired some people contract. They worked part time, and then, but it was probably, I don't know, 4 or 5, maybe year 5 or 6 before I hired somebody full time. And that was tough. It was the same struggle. It's just
Yeah,
it
I
really
wonder how you
similar
did
to
it for
starting
so
your own
long.
firm.
Yeah, I know, because I personally never thought I could do it alone. Never, ever,
Yeah,
ever have I thought I
really.
could do it alone. No, never. I couldn't. I mean, not the way I would wanna do it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wouldn't be rewarding for me. The reward comes from the synergy between the team members and the clients and the whole process. And I couldn't just wear all the hats. There's some hats I'm really good at, and there's some hats I'm horrible. So I wouldn't wanna, I wouldn't wanna be um like, I guess the way you started your firm, it wouldn't be the way I could have started with Flow, because it was never even about me. Like, you mentioned how this is for people and what you value in architecture, but at the same time, it was you. It was you, this talented individual that was at this firm, that could get to the top 10 on international and national competitions. So you were a star, you were a rising star, really, in every way and aspect. I don't think I ever have been or was to the point where I would be like, oh yeah, no, I can do this all day long. No. So I always saw it as like as a community, as a collective of forces, you know. And who can I associate with? And sometimes that's not even a question you ask yourself, but like they come to you that would get us to where we want to be. Like I see myself more like as a Agent Fury, you know, it's like the Avengers, and I'm just Agent Fury. That's all I am. I just here's the
But
debrief.
see,
This is what we need to
Fury's trying to
do.
protect the world from something. What was your motivating factor? Like, why? What made you want to
Well, and I guess we'll have a part two for this one, but in
do?
my end, it was there was some frustrations with the places of work that I was fortunate to be at, and they didn't. I never felt like I could really fit in some fashion, and it was very rigid and cold and sometimes boring, to be honest. So I needed a little bit more. That's why flow, right? Something a little bit more fluid, something a little bit more organic in a sense. And I didn't want anybody ever to feel like they didn't belong, right? Like I never wanted that to be the case. So that started kind of like fueling some fires within, and then it set off, and then it went on its own
So you had
direction.
similar motivations, it sounds like, but you were more motivated by creating sort of an environment that had the right dynamics to accomplish these things. Then,
I'm still working on that one, actually. Yeah, yeah, you are
yeah,
absolutely right. It's
yeah,
all those elements, all those players within the team that can make that sort of like ecosystem where we thrive and we all walk out with a sense of purpose. And wow, we did awesome today. You know what I mean? We have a lot
yeah,
and we did awesome. So
fantastic.
it's a work in progress process, but
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So no, that's it. I guess moving forward, and I will want to kind of start wrapping up on that. Okay, so those early years you hired late, relatively late actually, because I compared to me, we had an intern like right away, basically,
yeah.
and he wasn't just an intern. We had Julio and then an intern, and me and Marcos were always like, it's like left side of the brain, right side of the brain. It's just one. We're just one,
Right.
yeah. So I don't even count us as two. It's just one. It
One
reminds
plus
me.
one equals one.
Yeah, it reminds me of the movie Blackberry, how they had co-CEO. So we were just
Yeah,
co-CEOs, right? So
sure.
then Julio came in, and we had Linchuan. So it was always I needed that team. I always just needed that team because I still want to be impactful throughout the community, and I just couldn't be at the office doing the work and be within the community too. Like
Absolutely.
I couldn't do those
Yeah.
things. So I was like, I can't. I have to kind of, and it wasn't even an extension of my pencil because I have never been. I don't use anybody ever as a pencil. Like they're all their own pencils and they all draw their own things, and you know.
Sure.
So it was just more like here's kind of this mission that we're kind of building, and we all kind of want to sing in one accord, like what we mean, and all of us get it a little bit louder in some way or another. So that's how it was. So now moving forward, you're successful, I would say, right? Do you feel like you're successful?
People said that to me early on, was kind of, since you brought me back now, I'm thinking about that time period. Um, and I remember people saying that to me because I was winning a lot of design awards, but I didn't have a lot of work, and I wasn't making much money. I remember somebody coming up to me, "Wow, it's so awesome to see how successful you are." And I didn't feel successful. I felt like I was struggling because I was struggling. Um,
That's funny.
so, I mean, the corner didn't turn for it really till probably, I don't know, 2016, 17, where I had some bigger projects and I felt like I could take a deep breath and, um, it was probably going to work out. And then about a year or two later, I ended up partnering with my partner now and merging our two firms together. So by then I had two employees and he had two employees, and we merged together, and that tended to even out a lot. Because one of the things that happened with me, because I'm just very driven by the work, and one of the things that bothered me all over, one of my other motivations for starting my firm was I didn't really feel like people were being listened to, and that just, again, as an architect, feel this sort of responsibility to give them something that they can't imagine themselves. Otherwise, why wouldn't they just go do it themselves? And to have somebody, I feel like people are asking us for something, and for us not to give them just a full hearted effort to try and make what they're trying to do as good as it can possibly be, then we failed them. And so anyway, I don't know where I was going with that, but
No, it was just about the reasoning for why and then you joined forces, and that started evening out.
right, and we both have that same value system. So we came
Yeah,
together.
that's another question. Like, why join with somebody else? They
Oh, I
probably
do know
has the
where I was
same.
going with that.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, same answer to your question. So in doing this and sort of this really giving all of the effort to try and realize what they're doing, reach their highest aspirations. What would happen is, working on a project, being driven by the work, is you're on this ramp, right? You do this design, you're trying to execute it, it's being constructed. And because it was just me and one or two other people, we generally had one big project in the office. And so we're just churning, working on this thing. And once it sort of hits the crest of the hill, and starts to go into construction, and look around and go, oh crap, we have no other work to do. This fee is going to run out, so there's this scramble, but there's this natural sort of ebb and flow that goes on. Well, what happened, when I merged with Greg, is he has this other natural sort of ebb and flow. And then the two together sort of even out. The waves become something that becomes much more tolerable. And that's really
Do you
worked
guys
out a lot.
ever get on each other's shoes, like toes, like start
We
irritating each other a little bit, or not?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. But, we're very different
so.
people. We have very different personalities. I think one of the things that makes it work, he's 20 years older than me. He worked for IMPay, had his own firm in Dallas. He was design director at the largest firm in Fort Worth when I met him, which was, 10, 15 years before I started my firm. So we know each other a long time. We have a lot of respect for each other. And yeah, we argue like brothers, but there's just a respect in the way, we know at the end of the day, we're not it's like being married. You just,
No, it
at the end
is.
of the day,
I
your
always talk.
relationship's not over. You're having disagreements.
No, yeah, no. Me and my partner we don't argue much, but we've gotten to a point where we know each other very well to know what would bother somebody and what wouldn't bother the other.
Right.
And sometimes, we tend to always agree at some point on certain things, because the way we look at it, Bart, is we're doing everything for the betterment of our children, which is the company.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, what's
exactly.
best for the children, right? Like, what's the best thing that we could possibly do? So it's never a selfish thing, it's always what's going to be best for the children, and the children reap benefits for all of us at the end of the day. So we're good, so we always kind of have a moment of alignment. I tend to work a little faster. My mind is a little faster with things.
Right.
So like by the time I profess something to my business partner, I've already thought about it for many months, but he would see it as a new idea, and he's Darwin with just another new idea that wasn't cooked. And I'm like, well, they've been cooked. So what I've learned is I've learned to pace myself with him. I really have. I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
Let's just flirt with the idea first, give it a couple more months, and then I'm going to tell him more real plans. But probably it was 5 years ago when I already thought about that, and the situations change, and things like that. So, he's very methodical. I'm more visionary. Like, I'm more like visionary, like, okay, I want to go there. He's like, well, hold on now. How do we get there? Step one, he's very methodical. I never know how I get anywhere, but he kind of figures out the how. I just know we're gonna go that direction, So
Right.
it
I think
works
the
out.
important thing about partnership, which is exactly the same for y'all as it is for us, which is you have to share the same, I think, commitment and value, core values. Um, but then beyond that, you need to be very different people. Like you're saying, one's one half of the brain, one's the other half. If you have two Darwins, it doesn't work, right? You're
I would
not
hate
gaining
it. I would
anything.
hate it.
No, I
It
would
would
too. Same
it
thing.
would
You
be
tend to hate people
annoying.
who are like you too, or have more
Yeah.
struggle because your own insecurities. But same thing, the two Barts, it wouldn't work. But you know, Greg's an extrovert, so I don't have to worry about what he's thinking because it's coming out of his mouth, right? I'm sort of the opposite. I like to sort of think and mull things over and sort of overanalyze things before I say anything. Um, but you know, it takes those differences to really gain strength in the whole. And I think that's like you have that. That's what we have. I think that's really what makes a good
So
partnership
it's
work.
good. I guess it worked out really well for you. I mean, but what I was wondering was what were you lacking that got you to the direction of, hey, I should probably partner with somebody. Like what was I guess the impetus, right? Using that word
Right.
to want to do that.
There's a couple things. One was again being a really small firm. One of my struggles was I knew a lot of developers. I was in a position to talk to people about doing good sized projects. But what I found was I'd be talking to someone and they'd say, "Look, Bart, we'd love to have you do this, but there's just no way I can go in front of my investors or go to my board or go to my boss and say, I want this 3-person firm to design this, whatever it is, $10 million project." And I got that a lot. Um, and the other problem was, because I'm getting older now, things are changing a little bit. But then, you know, I had a baby face. I looked like I was, 20 years old. And, same thing. We can't take this kid, and put him in front of somebody. Um, and so, Greg has a lot of great experience. He's been in front of, you know, all kinds of people doing all sorts of things, has a ton of confidence, gray hair, um,
I
a
always
great
call it. I always
portfolio.
call. Yeah, I always call it. It's like we have whenever I'm in a room with architects, it's either gray hair or no hair, and I happen to be I happen to be the oddball there. So it's funny that you say
Yeah,
that because I was laughing. I'm like, yeah. I even told Jose Pleites the other day. It's like we have baby faces. We have to kind
that's
of
right.
we have to embrace those baby faces and just show with the knowledge people will respect you. Like whenever whatever
Right.
comes out of your mouth increases value and bottom line and is strategic, people start respecting you. Because unfortunately, we all have to do these preconceived things. It's just the way we're, since little kids, we have biases about things. It's almost impossible not to have them. It's part of our livelihood. So that's it. Okay, so you get to that point. And I guess in closing, I have two questions, I guess, for you. Um, I guess three, but first, what would you have done differently going back? What would you have done differently if you could? Opening the firm, the process of opening the firm, maybe when you hired, like anything going back to now, from now all the way back. Like what would you have done differently that you were like, oh, yeah, that was a bad idea. I wish I did it differently.
I it's a tough question. I tend not to think that way, just to be honest.
Because it's not on the side of regret, right? Or what would you have done better?
Well, you have to
It's not
know
different,
what
but
the
what would you have done better?
alternative and what the alternative consequences are. I know people ask me all the time, like, we'll go tour a project, and we're like, man, and I'll tell them the sort of the arc of the project. What happened? We went through this VE and had to take all the stuff out. We had to rework it, and they'll go, man, what's the one thing you'd want back? And you go, I just don't know. It's all part of the same story. If you take one piece out, something may have changed that would not have been good in the end. Um, so I just don't know. I, I don't know. I tend to be prone to anxiety anyway, so maybe I just don't let myself go down that
All
road. I
right,
don't
no,
know
that's good. I
how
mean,
to answer that one.
so basically, the answer is, the outcomes I've received have guided me to where I am, and I'm proud of where I am right now. Why would I want to be
Sure.
changing any of that stuff, right?
Well, and even the
Um,
things that didn't work out well, you learned something that is very, sort of influential in what you do next and something that happens later. So it's really hard. to say. I didn't have it. I was very, very lucky. I was very, very fortunate to get through, especially that early time period, and have enough work and enough fee to keep going forward. And I'm just very grateful that for where I got, and then that I was able to actually start a firm and make it get into something that ultimately became successful. So I don't really have any regrets.
Perfect. I love it. So now let's go the other way. Looking forward. What's in it for you now, Bart Shaw? What gets you excited? What
You know,
keeps you up at night in a positive way that you're looking forward to in the next, I don't know, decade or a few decades or whatever, you know?
everything, it's interesting. I got a lot of opportunity over my career because I was an early adopter of 3D modeling and visualization. I did that in graduate school. And actually, I worked under economic development grant and did designs for rural Texas communities that were under economic hardship. And I learned a lot doing that. And, we're entering this era now of AI and everybody getting, freaked out about, replacing jobs of architects. But I'm really excited about it. I mean, we've jumped in with both feet. I think it's fantastic. It doesn't bother me at all. Yeah, it's not stealing. Again, I sort of explained to you the heart of what my thinking is about design and how it relates to people. The computer will never be able to do that. It spits out images. I think the positive things about it is it exposes people, I think, to more sophisticated architecture. The stuff that it spits out, honestly, if that replaced all of the sort of banal crap that gets built, it'd be fantastic. Unfortunately, it's none of it's buildable. But I just think overall, it's an exciting time, I think, to be in our industry and see where this all goes. You can't be an architect without being an optimist. I think it's inherent in what we do. And with all of the world turmoil, the political environment, getting nastier and nastier, it's very hard to watch sometimes. But at the same time, I think we always believe that architecture can improve people's lives and make our communities better. That's what keeps us going.
Nice. I mean, that's a wrap right there. I mean, you did a great job, Bart. So how do we find you? Do you have any social media? I guess any places where people can kind of follow you, know more about the things that you guys are doing, all the fun stuff, tell us a little bit about that. And, everybody can go check Bart Shaw or
Sure.
fellow SFX board member for Texas. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, our website's abanyashaw.com. I don't know we're on Instagram. I think it's at Abanya Shaw, I believe. And then I have a personal one that's I don't know what it is. Maybe I can post it in the
Yeah,
comments or something.
I guess with your name, people can find you. But thank you so much for doing this,
Yeah.
for the SFX, for being a board member, and sharing your story and everything that you have to offer. I'm very, very happy, and we'll see everybody on the next one. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.